And this disturbing video shows the agents beating a Navy veteran with batons and then dousing him with pepper spray when he says that he was trying to engage them in a civil conversation.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings, this is Byrne, the Anadromist, coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia. And I thought what we would do today is something a little bit different. I thought what we would do is kind of a how-to. I have been disturbed by things I see online, interpretations of events. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people get a lot of their news from, first of all, mainstream media sources, particularly the larger obvious names, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, BBC, The Guardian, and I could go on. Another thing is that they're getting their next level of interpretation from friends who are passing articles and memes and videos and all sorts of things through their social media. So I'll see a friend who's written something about an event, and I look at that and I say, like, what this person is sharing literally has nothing to do with what actually happened. So, being disturbed by that, I see that what's happening is people essentially are living in a propaganda stew. They are being boiled alive in it, is what's happening. And I thought I would try to give you a how to find out what's happening with as little propaganda as possible. Now, the answer to the question is not simply to go from MSNBC over to Fox and then go back and forth. Why? Because both of them have their slants. And as Jacques Ellul says, when you are between two propagandas, you do not get the truth. You get slugged from both sides. And that's an important thing to remember, especially if you're feeling a bit exhausted by all this stuff. But and one of the things I learned a while ago, I was teaching some homeschool students about film and media history in my own imperfect way. I spent 2 winter seasons doing this and tried to be as thorough as possible, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't. But one of the things that I realized while I was teaching is that in schools, people spend an awful lot of time teaching things like English and writing, which are very important. We speak English, at least, I do, and we write. But you know what? People spend far more time looking at screens now. And as we'll hear Francis Schaeffer say in a moment, people see things on screens with their own eyes, so they're convinced that it's true. But what most people don't have is an education in media, filmic literacy. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to replicate any part of my film and media class that I gave to my homeschool students, but what I am going to try to do is give you a clear example of how propaganda works. And this is a really complicated thing to do, and you'll see how complicated it is. Well, first of all, you can look how long the actual video is. It's that long because it's that hard. And all we're going to be doing is looking at essentially a 30-second clip. And that's how complicated this is the uses of that 30-second clip. But in order to understand it, you have to have background. And if you don't have background, you are simply a slave of what you see with your eyes. And it's a shame that we don't have more education on film and media literacy, because then you would understand what a jump cut does, what the sound does, what the editing does, what the narration does. You can watch something on television and go like, oh, they're playing with that right now. I mean, I do that all the time. Why? I'm obviously trained in this. I've spent years getting that way, so that I'm not a sucker, which is what you are if you believe what you see on the media. Here's one way to know that what you're seeing, particularly in television streams, is a lie, is because if you've ever been associated with something that got on television, maybe you were doing, community theater, or maybe you were doing some sort of local event, and then someone came and interviewed you for some sort of televised presentation, and then you saw that presentation later. And you said to yourself, well, they missed that. That wasn't right. That was not what I was trying to say. They cut out the wrong clip. They didn't get the part where I was saying this. You would see all the stuff that they did to make it what it shouldn't be. But instead, we apply that only when there are things that we understand, and we don't apply that to the fact that happens all the time. So, well, let me do this. One of the things that's been coming to me as we think about these things, I'm going to ramble a little on some of this because I just decided I really should put this together. It seems to be timely. Is that, that we need to have certain foundational principles when we watch anything that's presented to us. Documentaries are the worst. If you think a documentary is neutral, I remember someone saying, oh, you really should watch that documentary, Jesus Camp. And I watched it and I said, yeah, I guess you didn't realize what they were doing in that documentary. They were being neutral by putting droning music under everything and no context. Perfect way to present propaganda. Yeah, there were things wrong with the group being presented in that, but it was a mishmash of clips from the beginning, a little bit here. Make sure you get the most outrageous things that these people say. Don't get any context. And put droning music underneath it when you're not commenting on it, because that is a comment. But that's how propaganda works. So what are the things we need to do? First of all, you have to admit your own biases. What are they? Are you, I am a Christian. I am not a particularly normal Christian in the sense that, I believe in the Bible, but I don't believe in, it's like if someone comes up to me and says, yes, we've got an evangelistic plan for reaching the world by 2030, I would look very suspiciously at them and going like, so this is what kind of propaganda plan is this going to be? I'm going to be very questioning. So I'm that kind of Christian. There are people who aren't, people who think mega churches are great. You could be one of them. If you are, you should put that down as, this is one of my biases. I think mega churches are great. You should understand what you are. Now, let's say you're an atheist. Great. What kind of an atheist? They're not all the same. Some atheists are like, well, I don't believe in God or anything, but you guys can. I understand why that might be important for you. And then there's kind of people who are like, you believe in God? You're an idiot. What kind of an atheist are you? What kind of an agnostic? What kind of a Hindu? What kind of a Muslim? What kind of, Baptist? What kind of Orthodox? There are all sorts of types. So you need to admit your biases. Then you come from a certain culture, certain family. All of these things go into your biases. If you don't think you have any biases, you're in deep trouble. And you really should turn this off now, because I'm going to come at you with a skewer and ram you through, because we all have biases. If you think you have perfect ideas about society and the government right now, not only are you a fool, you are dangerous. And a lot of the people who are protesting certain things right now are sadly in this category of people who think they know all the answers. And they're very dogmatic about what needs to happen, where human culture is always, always, always super sloppy and messy. You have to understand the biases also of whatever sources you use. So, for instance, Fox News is obviously on the right, but they're not the farthest right. I mean, a lot of people on the left think they're like Nazis or something, which is ridiculous. I mean, there's a lot of shades of right before you get to Nazis. And one of the problems that people have is Tim Pool, a great independent journalist, whom I will discuss a little bit later in this, uses a great illustration. It's kind of like people on the left are looking through a door hole at the people on the right. And when they look, that the first thing they'll see is they'll look and they'll see, for instance, way in the back, if this is a spectrum, way in the back, there's someone holding a Nazi flag. And they'll see that and they'll assume everyone over there is a Nazi. Likewise, people on the left or on the right are looking over at the left and they'll see some people here, but way in the back, there's a Nazi communist flag. Hammer and sickle. So they'll assume everyone over there is like that. Well, it's not like that. Everything's much messier. And you have to understand that every piece of media comes to you with some sort of bias. My biases are, like I said, I am a Christian in a historical manner. I believe in free speech. I am an American in the traditional manner, and I'm not an American in the sense of the new social justice ideology. Obviously, social justice is important. Not being a racist is important, but I consider the ideology to be really dangerous. These are my biases. Do with them what you will. If you want to know what I think about every political figure and stuff, I'm not going to do that for you right now, because that's not important. If it's important to you, you might check your biases and say, what's going on here? Why do I get so worked up about certain figures? But no one is unbiased, but everyone secretly thinks they are. And I've had people, friends send me messages, kind of like saying, well, what do you really think about X? Because they want to purity check me. And I'm like, if you're asking that kind of question, I don't really want to give you an answer because you obviously have a problem. But here's the thing. So if you're watching the news lately, now I use Fox and CNN as roughly equivalent to each other on left and right. You might say, well, what about MSNBC? Well, MSNBC could be considered your left too. And in fact, there's very little difference these days between MSNBC, who used to be more blatantly left-wing, and CNN, who has become more left-wing in this kind of weird commercial sort of sense. So, and Fox, who is, like I say, more on the right, but they're not, like I say, there's a lot more room on the right besides them. And there is very little media that is in a public forum that you hear from these. So they kind of have to make do with the boogeyman on the right. So what is it? Well, if you watch CNN, you'll see them talking about peaceful protests. You'll see them showing you clips of policemen using too much force. They will talk about all sorts of things. There's a lot they're not going to show you. Likewise, if you're watching Fox, they're going to show you when police get hurt. They're going to show you buildings burning down in the city. They're going to show you riots. So these people's narrative is always the peaceful protesters, which is really ironic. There's that great clip where the guy is saying well, it's a largely peaceful demonstration, and you look behind him and the building is burning, to which the mind fries at such, Orwellian, description of events, And then on the other side, you could get this other sense that, we just have to be Americans, damn it. And I'm not either. I have my leanings, but, if you were to try to do a purity test left or right, I'm going to fall all over the place. And so when I hear, but that's how it goes. Now, other sources, I find ABC to be a little less hysterical. I find the Wall Street Journal to be a little less hysterical. I find CBS to be a little less hysterical. And I say a little. They don't seem to be on board with the full program. However, the BBC does now. The BBC or The Guardian. Well, The Guardian is a source that prides itself on being more left. Although there's columnists like Timothy Garton-Ash who write for The Guardian, who I have gotten a lot from. But knowing these kinds of sources, the Economist or whatever, these aren't going to protect you from getting propaganda. Something's happened in the last few years where places like the Washington Post, and most recently of all, the New York Times, have gone with the left program. Or maybe I should do this way, whatever. I don't know, left or right. Just forgive my whatever side I'm holding up, because I don't care. But there was recently a whole series of events at the New York Times which showed that the younger, more woke crowd has essentially taken over the interpretation of what the New York Times means. So, they've always been kind of center to left with, they still have Ross Douthat, who is a right-wing Catholic writer. So they're not completely over there, but, more people are having to flee because they can't pass the purity test. So just because you're intelligent doesn't mean that you are immune from propaganda. This is an important thing Jacques Ellul said, and that is, he said, in fact, the intelligent people get more propaganda than anyone else. Why? They're watching more news. They think, because they have a university education, that they are invulnerable. Ooh, the perfect target for propaganda. We are all propagandized. When I'm reading certain things that are written by my friends on, say, Facebook, and I'll come to a bit of a screed that a friend of mine published. I won't mention his name or anything, but I'm reading that and I'm just boiling to write something. Well, that's the propaganda working through you, boiling to reply. And whatever you're about to reply, it's going to be like, we're all affected by propaganda. And if you say you're not, again, I don't want to talk to you about any political subjects, because you're obviously deceived if you think you can't be affected by propaganda. Now, next, we have to understand some historical subject matter. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about history at the end, but one word I see being thrown around, well, two words I see being thrown around an awful lot these days are fascism and racism. And I am absolutely sure that 90% of the people throwing these words around have no idea what they're even saying. That is to say, what is the difference between fascism and Nazism? Do you know? They are not the same thing. Do you have any knowledge? I'm just asking you these questions. Can you answer this question? What are the differences between fascism and Nazism? They are not the same. What is fascism? Is it just people who want you to do something you don't want to do? Is it, secret police, military state? Is that what you think fascism is? Do you know that the roots of fascism are connected to an art movement? Just wondering. What's the difference between fascism and racism? Person who is a racist, I'm not using the racism in the more modern, quote-unquote, systemic use of the word, whatever that means. I'm saying a person who's an actual racist, like Southern KKK style racist. What's the difference between a racist and a fascist? Do you think they're exactly the same? Again, this goes back to the question, what do you think the difference is between fascism and Nazism? And if you think there is no difference, you are ignorant. You don't know what you're talking about, which means you have no right to throw the word around and accuse other people of being that. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you don't understand what I'm talking about, you better stop using these words, because that is the point. People are throwing these words around and they don't know. What's the difference between populism and fascism? Is there a difference? You bet you. There is a difference. And if you don't know the difference, don't go A equals B equals C equals Z. It's not that simple. In fact, one school of fascism is almost identical to the definition of that Antifa activists give themselves. That is to say, it's an anti-bourgeois fascism. And like I say, if you don't know the history of fascism, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should probably stop talking about it and get some serious historical knowledge. And I don't just mean read the Wikipedia page. And I don't mean read the literature on the subject. It's not going to help you to, quote unquote, do the work. You have to actually get some knowledge, which comes from, how do you know who to read? Like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about history near the end. Here's interesting. What is racism? And we hear this word all the time. Now, when I was young, it was fairly clear. Someone who felt that somehow people of a different race were inferior to you, and, well, that's not a good thing. That somehow I, being white, am better than someone being black. Well, obviously, that's not a good thing. But that's not how the word is being used anymore, if you notice in discussions. I saw a video recently, guy who's not even a boomer. He's older than a boomer. He's silent generation, still alive. A guy named David Hoffman, who's done tons and tons of interviews with people through his life, starting in the 1960s, but he continues to do them. And he's got a YouTube channel, which I highly recommend, just David Hoffman. And but what was interesting was he put a video out recently of some outraged voices of black people from the 1960s. From the civil rights era. It was fascinating. And it was also fascinating for me to compare the difference between their rhetoric and the rhetoric today. But what was really weird to me was I went down and there was a girl, obviously in her young 20s, who leaves a comment. I'm going to read you the comment because I really couldn't believe this comment. And this is what she wrote. I'm just going to read it exactly. When I grew up, I thought racism ended with slavery. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I learned about Jim Crow laws and how black people have been held down systematically for generations. Even if slavery never happened, how black people have been treated since the last black slave was freed, I'm not even going to begin to try to understand that. You could argue that they still aren't. The school to prison pipeline has replaced it. Is disgraceful. Okay, slavery is literally only the beginning. How they were treated after and up till this day is equally as worse. Well, first of all, the sentence doesn't make any sense. She needs to learn to write. Equally as worse? Equal? Well, if it's equal, then it can't be worse. I think she means to say equally as bad. But if it's worse, she's saying that, I think she's trying to say on some level that the way black folk in America today are treated worse than slavery. What does this mean? Well, that is the level of dialogue that you hear when you just watch videos of raw conversation with people. I've been recently watching Benjamin Boyce's amazing, it's now 22 parts. I think it's supposed to get up to about 23 or 24 or more, documentary of what happened at Evergreen University in Washington. And you just hear the people talking. I mean, you're literally in an alternative universe of facts being jumbled up as much as this. But if that's the case, what in the world do people mean by slavery and racism and all of these words just suddenly are thrown up for grabs because they all just have emotive content without any actual meaning, except to say that, you are a member of this particular group. That's not a good thing. You should fess up to it. Yeah, okay. I'm white. You got me. And also I come from I'm not even going to begin to go. I'm not going to try to say anything about anything. The point of this is not for me to try to make political points. The point of this is for me to try to dig under what's been going on and to see how we can get information that is dependable and isn't simply propaganda. So most folks today, unfortunately, are woefully ignorant of communism. Interestingly enough, if the F word gets thrown around all the time, everyone's a fascist. Who, if you have any problem with anyone, if you believe in any sort of societal discipline, you're a fascist. If you're at all traditionalist, you're a fascist. If you're at all right-wing, you're a fascist. So, and again, most people have no clue about the history of fascism. I've spent probably 150 hours watching documentaries on World War II. I've probably spent another, 60 or 70 hours watching documentaries on fascism. I probably read about 30 books on the subject, just enough to have soaked myself into this subject so I understand it. And so I can always smell when someone doesn't know anything about what they're talking about. But people are then even more ignorant about what communism is, because at least in schools they get some talk about, World War II was bad, Holocaust, but does anyone know about the gulags? Somehow, we won the Cold War, and there are people out there going, they just never did it right. As Jordan Peterson says, anyone who says real socialism has never been tried is someone you should stay 100 miles away from, because they're the kind of person who thinks they could do it right. And if they're that kind of person, you don't want to spend time with them, because they're obviously not going to be able to do that. And most folks, certainly most folks of a kind of younger folks, say below the age of 30, really couldn't tell you much about the death statistics of fascism versus communism. I think Mao in China probably did more with the Great Leap Forward than Hitler did in his whole career. The problem with Hitler was that he was just so pointed and the whole thing with the Jews and just everything was just, it's almost like designed to make the ultimate boogeyman. Whereas the communists did everything kind of behind closed doors. They were much better at keeping away the gears and the mechanisms away from the public. And so as a result, there are still fools who believe the idiot notion that the world should just get together and live as one. If you get my reference there. Well, so that means most people don't realize what Maoist struggle sessions are, where the word is coming back into play. I've known about this for a while. Actually, Jacques Ellul, in his book on propaganda, has a whole appendix at the end, which I highly recommend, on communist China and struggle sessions, and as perhaps the most devious form of propaganda that's ever been devised. But, for instance, in the 1960s and 70s, you started getting cults who used variations on the Maoist struggle sessions. Some of them, like the Moonies, seem to have tapped in directly and understood it and saw the potential. The Children of God used to use sessions like this. A lot of it comes out of psychological therapies as well. Scientology used these kind of sessions. The Earhart Seminar trainings, EST, they use these kind of sessions. Most 70s cults had some variation on the struggle session or the psychotherapy sessions, where you'd basically have a group of people. There's a danger of this even in something like AA. You have a group of people and you get one or two new people, and all the rest are basically people who've been there before. And they're all just basically there to go like, yes, you're one of us now. You're starting to understand. See, it would never work the other way around. If you had 10, 15 doubters and two true believers, because then every time the true believer would start to say, yes, you're one of us now, the other people go like, what are you talking about? See, that's why a bit of healthy skepticism is a good thing to develop, which makes me really grateful for the 16 years I spent in New York City. So that's how a struggle session works. Essentially, it's a group who, and you can see this really clearly in the complete evergreen story that Benjamin Boyce has been putting out. It's like one struggle session after another, and the poor staff are all like these sad, like Chinese intellectuals during the 1960s cultural revolution, who are sitting there. It's like they used to put these signs around their head and give them mile-long dunce caps and such, and that's what you get the feeling that you of in many cases today. Anyway, so again, there are words being thrown around, and if you're one of those people who says Trump's a fascist, so-and-so's Nazi, whatever, and you don't understand what these words actually mean, I don't care about anything you have to say, because it's just ignorance, and how do you get beyond a state of ignorance? Well, let's start dealing with the nuts and bolts. So we're going to look at one piece in particular, but before we do, we're going to get a little bit of background. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot of during this period is that Francis Schaeffer had a documentary that came out about 1977, and it was called How Should We Then Live? It's a bit of a clunky documentary. Filmically, it doesn't hold up. I think that's its strength, though. If it was done too professionally, it would be propaganda. But instead, it's done more honestly from his heart. There's all sorts of like loose ends. But one of the things that really keeps coming back to me during this period is he did a short section on media manipulation and how exactly media manipulation works. And he did it in a very clever way. Let's watch that clip now.
And, of course, we must think of manipulatory possibilities of television. It has its own tremendous possibilities.
Violence broke out again last night as some young people were prevented from meeting peaceably in the downtown area by noticeably nervous, if not to say trigger-happy police. Frank Bushman, attorney for the young people who are to be arraigned in court tomorrow morning, pointedly remarked on this overreaction by the police.
I hereby declare this an unlawful assembly.
Late last night, disorder broke out among a small, unruly mob as our guardians of the peace quietly and efficiently, in spite of extreme provocation, restored order.
I command you to disperse, and if you do not, you shall be arrested for refusal to disperse. You have 2 minutes to disperse.
It is important that our courts make an example of these hoodlums and hand out the kind of sentences they so richly deserve.
We staged this scene. We filmed it to show that television can tell any story that it wants to tell. In both versions, the action was the same, and the actors did exactly the same things. However, the camera was placed differently. The editor edited differently, and the announcer told a different story. We would be naive not to realize that what we're seeing is an edited symbol. But the nature of TV is such, we see it with our own eyes, that we naturally look at it as though it were objective truth. For many, what they see on television is more true than what they see with their eyes in the external world. Let me stress, it is always unfair to say the media does this or the press does that. There are always individuals or individual publications, for example, that are not included in the generalization. But the mass media can be used by an authoritarian manipulating government or an elite. The elite gives the arbitrary absolutes, and then not only TV, but all the mass media can be used for manipulation. And a plot or conspiracy are not needed. All that is needed is that the people in the places of influence and those who decide what is the news have in common the modern results of humanism, the modern worldview, which we have considered at length in this series. When the perspective, the worldview of the elite, coincides with some of the influential news carriers, it does not have to be all, then either consciously or unconsciously, the media becomes an instrument for manipulation.
So, I love the fact that he says it need not be a conspiracy. It's just an agreement of the elites with the mainstream media. 90% of the mainstream media that is the main dominant forces of news, according to a recent survey, are simply like against Trump, lean left in some manner, and then you have about 10% that don't. Now, that doesn't mean the 10% are right, and that doesn't mean Trump is a great person. But what I'm saying is there are some serious biases going along. Also, what it means is when you get news about current events, it's really hard to make sense of them. For instance, you may have been hearing a lot about what's going on in Portland lately. Well, if you're one of those people who thinks they understand it, I'm about to turn what you think inside out. Because if you've been getting your news on the mainstream media, if your narrative runs something like this, there were peaceful protesters. There were people in the streets. Yeah, sometimes they get a little carried away. But then what happened was Trump said the federal troops in. And they got upset because of that. And, and essentially that was a fascist move on Trump's part. If that's your narrative, I can tell what news sources you've been watching, because essentially you've missed the details. But how do I know? Because I'm about to show you. First, let's watch the mainstream news we can't do all of it. So we're going to do one little story. It's about 30 seconds long. Let's go ahead and watch that. And we're going to watch it from two different mainstream sources. We're going to watch it from CNN first, and then I think it's MSNBC after that.
Chaos in Portland over the weekend as social justice protesters clashed with federal agents who were deployed there by the Trump administration. And now CNN has learned the president is also getting ready to send federal agents to Chicago. The U.S. attorney in Oregon now wants an investigation in Portland after videos surfaced showing unidentified camouflaged agents arresting protesters and putting them into unmarked cars. This incident was tweeted out by Oregon's Democratic U.S. Senator Jeff Merkley. City and state leaders accused the agents of escalating the situation.
The president has a complete misunderstanding of cause and effect. What's happening here is we have dozens, if not hundreds, of federal troops descending upon our city. And what they're doing is they are sharply escalating the situation. Their presence here is actually leading to more violence and more vandalism, and it's not helping the situation at all. They're not wanted here. We haven't asked them here. In fact, we want them to leave.
And this disturbing video shows the agents beating a Navy veteran with batons and then dousing him with pepper spray when he says that he was trying to engage them in a civil conversation. That Navy veteran, Chris David, is joining me now. Chris, thank you so much for being with us. Just walk us through what happened that night as you were there, I guess, trying to speak to the officers or troops. You tell us what happened.
Well, yeah, that was actually the primary reason that I went down to this protest, since it was my first one. I wanted to see if I could have a civil discussion with these federal agents, officers, and ask them why they felt that it was okay what they were doing, that I felt that they were violating their oath to the Constitution. And so what I did in preparation for that, I put on my Naval Academy sweatshirt, my Navy wrestling hat, and my backpack with all my CB patches, under the presumption that they would respect that and maybe talk to me instead of treat me as some other protester. That didn't work out at all.
No, that did not work out. And where you see the video of what then happened, you just turned away. I mean, you had a signal for them as you turned away, but you walked away from them as they were beating you. Tell us what is the damage here?
Well, just a bunch of bruises otherwise, but they did pretty much smash my hand up quite a bit with their batons. So I've got a couple fractures in this hand. One of them's pretty serious, so I'm going to have surgery to have that.
Okay, so I know that part of this for you was going down there wearing your sweatshirt, wearing your hat, and thinking that perhaps you might get further in a civil discussion than someone who was not showing, that they have what, I think serving in the military, it's sort of your ability to say, look, I love my country, and I've shown that, right? So as a veteran, you were trying to communicate that. How do you feel about the president sending in federal troops as a veteran?
I'm 100% against it. I think it is a move, it's a unilateral move that's being made in order to generate chaos and create divisiveness. I don't see any point to what they're doing, because every night they do the same thing, the same results occur, and the protests only get bigger.
I know one of the things you're trying to, I think you want veterans to you have a message for veterans. What is your message for veterans?
My message for veterans is remember your oath to the Constitution. I think almost all of us do. For pretty much all of us who serve, we understand the meaning of those. And I was hoping that some of these federal agents were veterans, and maybe they would remember the oath of office they took when they were in the military.
I want to listen now, Chris, to how the acting DHS Deputy Secretary Ken Cuccinelli described what happened to you.
What you have there is Marshal Service folks. You don't have DHS officers. I'm familiar with the video you're talking about. And all I have is the video that I've seen. I haven't seen either the audio or the reports of officers of what was going on. But
based on what you see,
based on what you see in that video, just based on what you see, is that unusually? No. I don't base things on one. The reason we came there wasn't because of some future video. The reason we advanced other DHS law enforcement officers is because there was intelligence locally generated that there were going to be threats to federal facilities. Maintaining an appropriate response is an ongoing obligation. I grant you that, and that's for all of us. But at the same time, the threat to those federal facilities and officers did materialize.
What is your response to Cuccinelli?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Ken Cuccinelli cannot see what is obvious to millions of other people.
Which is?
And, well, that I was standing there peacefully and then they beat me for pretty much no reason. Now, I understand the pickle that he is in. He cannot say, yeah, that was inappropriate. Almost everybody else in the United States can, but he can't. And he didn't answer the question. Was that appropriate behavior for somebody who was standing there peaceful?
Yeah, it's almost a rhetorical question, Chris. I think it's a rhetorical question. We know the answer. And look, thanks for joining us, and good luck, because you do have surgery ahead of you since your hand was smashed and you have various fractures. Thank you for being with us from Portland.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Okay, so that seems pretty cut and dried. There was a guy who was there peacefully. These federal officers just basically attacked him, pushed him out of the way, and gave him some bruises and maybe some more serious damage in his fingers. And I think the point that I'm trying to make is this. It isn't as cut and dried. If you think you understood anything in watching that, we're going to watch one more in a minute. And one of the reasons, there's a couple things I'm doing here. I want to show you one more news clip. But and now what I'm doing is I'm showing you the entire news clip of both of these clips. So these are both like 5 minutes each. Then I'm going to show you lots of other clips. Now I thought, to make clear what's been happening in Portland, I thought to myself, well, I could just make a montage of this. It would take about 5-10 minutes. Then I thought, no, that's what they would do. They are masters of assembling information, and that what they do with the information is they spin it a certain way and then give it back to you. I want to give you what I'm seeing. So the best way for me to do that is to give it to you the way I see it. And the way I see it is not in little sound bites. Now, one of the things I don't want to talk about too much later is the way the host was talking, the way that there was another guy talking to the federal officer, and he was doing this thing, but based on what you see, but based on what you see, but based on what you see, trying to interrupt him. This whole style of interrupting people in conversations has gotten like crazy lately. And, you can see this in Britain as well, that people no longer will let a person answer. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, they want to get to their point. They want to go like slam dunk and get to their point. The second thing is they only have a certain amount of time on the news, so they've got to get there quick. And if a guy is just going off and trying to really explain something, that's not good news, at least in their mind. Well, I want to give you more. But before I do, I want to give you one more. This is MSNBC's version. I think it's MSNBC. Their version of what happened. The same guy, they'll interview him, they'll show you the video clips. Notice there's one thing that's a little different on the video clip this time around. Now, it's a really short clip. There are actually two different angles, and we'll discuss this later. But one thing that's different about this clip, and I'll just point this out so you can watch for it, is they actually include the sound. And the sound is a big clue that it's not exactly as our poor veteran is describing it. It's not him walking up and simply standing there and talking. Listen to the sound. But again, listen to the way that all of this is spun.
Portland is bracing for yet more protests tonight, where, like previous nights, federal agents will again patrol the protests. And the president indicated that this may be coming to more American cities.
There was a report out this morning that you're considering sending 175 federal troops to these cities to help local law enforcement. Can you fill us in on that?
It depends on what your definition of troops is. We're sending law enforcement. Portland was totally out of control. We're looking at Chicago, too. We're looking at New York. Look at what's going on.
Depends on what your definition of troops is. That's going to come up in a minute, so just hold that thought. Back in Portland, the backlash to this federal invasion, as some people call it, is growing. The mayor's calling what happened a, quote, direct threat to democracy. Protesters are remaining in the streets with a group called Moms, look at them, Moms Against Police Brutality, linking arms to protect the protesters on Sunday, to protect peaceful protesters from armed federal agents using weapons on them. Overnight, agents fired tear gas, scattering the self-named Walls of Mum. That's who they fired tear gas at. And then their 53-year-old Naval Academy graduate named Chris David. That's him in the sweatshirt, the Navy sweatshirt. This military veteran was so disturbed by the images of federal agents throwing protesters into unmarked cars that he took it upon himself to visit the protests on Saturday night, to talk to those agents, to ask them what they're thinking, why they're doing this. This video is of Mr. David approaching federal agents to talk to them, upholding their oath, asking him about upholding their oath to the Constitution. Look what they do to him. They beat him. Warning, this is disturbing. Look at that guy beating on him. Mr. David, as you can see, never flinched while he was being struck with the baton. They finally sprayed him in the face. Joining me now is that Navy veteran, Chris David. Mr. David, thank you for being with us. It's kind of unbelievable. I can't believe how you didn't flinch. This guy had two arms on a baton, and he's hitting you in the legs and about the body. Are you injured?
Yeah, I did get injured. Principally, my arm was broken. But in addition to that, I've got, some bruising all over my body from the baton.
What a remarkable thing. You went there to talk to them. You are a veteran of the United States Navy, and you had a sense that federal officers or agents or whatever you want to call these guys, people working for the federal government in enforcement of law, have a responsibility. They swear an oath. You went to talk to them about that. You weren't up in anybody's business. You weren't causing trouble. You just wanted to talk.
No, that's exactly what I wanted to do, was just talk to them. And the thing that was so upsetting was that there didn't seem to be any recognition that as a veteran, I was even going to be listened to or treated any differently than anybody else. And that sort of makes sense because if they're going to gas moms, they're going to beat up vets.
The president was asked about sending in more troops, or whatever he calls them. He calls them federal enforcement officers. What did you see on these people? Because we're getting reports that they don't have identifying badges. You can't tell who they are. They don't have the name of an agency. Some of them have vests that say police, but anybody can pick those up. Who do you think they are?
Oh, I have no idea to this day who they actually were. I've still mystified, and I'm not sure I have a good answer as to who those gentlemen were. Were they Customs and Border Patrol? Were they Marshal Service? Were they Federal Protection Service? Nobody knows. I haven't gotten a good answer on that. I think that would be a good question for Ken Cuccinelli.
Yeah, well, he says that what you're seeing in Portland, I'm putting words in his mouth, but it seems to be a pilot project. They are talking about meeting resistance, as they call it, anywhere in America. What do you make of that?
Well, I do think this is the test case. I do think this is supposed to be the first domino that falls. What we're finding is that they probably were using Portland as a testing ground for rolling out in other cities, and Trump pretty much listed exactly what those cities were going to be, which are Chicago, New York, and any place he decides that he doesn't like to see protesting happen.
I am glad to talk to you, Chris David, and I'm sorry that you're injured. It is remarkable footage. Thank you for going and trying to talk to these people and asking them what they believe they're doing and how that relates to the oath that they've taken. Thank you, sir. Good to meet you.
It seems pretty clear-cut what happened. Except I was disturbed as I watched that because I said, wait a minute, there are all these other questions hanging around in my mind. Now, one of the reasons I'm choosing this particular event is because it seems so cut and dried, and because I haven't seen anyone else really talk about it. So I decided to look into it. I decided to do what I really suggest you doing. Do not believe the mainstream media on anyone, Fox, NBC, ABC, it doesn't matter. Go look for the raw footage on YouTube. And let me tell you something. There's always raw footage on YouTube. These reporters, News Today isn't like, MSNBC and CNN didn't send reporters out to get this footage. This was just stuff they happened to get. It looked spectacular. They ran with it. Secondly, every word of that commentator talking about Mr. Chris David's experiences is slanted in a very direct thing. Also, when they're interviewing Trump, by the way, they always do this. Did you catch the edit? It's just like he was talking, then suddenly there's a really quick break, and then he mentions the three cities, and then they fade out really quickly. I'm not going to go into this. One of the interesting things, though, about all of this is, you could do a whole study of how Trump is edited on the mainstream media. I'm not going there. That's like much too big for me to deal with. I'm dealing with that 30-second clip. And here's the interesting thing about this clip. Mr. David is saying, I couldn't find out anything from them. As I watch this footage, we seem to have the entirety of his interactions with these people. We may not, but that's what it seems. We seem to have him going up, trying to do something, getting beaten back, and I don't want to justify the federal soldiers who were beating him back, the troops, the marshals, I think they were Custom Border Patrol people. They're hitting him to get him out of there, but I don't want to say that was a good thing. But then he turns away and he flashes the FU sign to them, which you don't really see in this, but we will see because I did find, of course, the raw footage. And once you see the raw footage, it takes on a very different perspective. But one of the things that's happening is, and you'll hear it over and over, Trump is attacking protesters. No mention of this other word, which would seem to me to be a pretty good word to use, rioters. What's the difference between a protester and a rioter? They bring out the whole wall of moms things, which I'm going to deal with in a bit here as well. Because all of this is part of the narrative. Well, the first bit of narrative spin that's been clogging up the entire discussion is that certain outlets of the media refuse, and I mean literally, refuse to use the word rioter. And they certainly aren't going to use probably a more appropriate word, insurrectionists. These people are trying to destroy something. What are they trying to destroy? Well, a federal courthouse. I wonder what that's about. Well, anyway, I'm not like I said, I'm not going to do any sort of full political take on this because I think it's all too hot and we don't really understand. But one thing is for sure, if you have been watching mainstream sources for the last 2 months, they've been trying to show you as many peaceful protesters as they can, which is why the Wall of Moms things was great visuals. But here's the point. I'm going to prove to you now that what's been going on in Portland for the last 2 months has been anything but peaceful protests. But let's start off, let's give them their due. There were some peaceful protests. This next clip is what I think everyone thinks of when they think of what's going on. And this is what people want to go on. This was Portland near the beginning of the George Floyd protests.
Hey Dale, good job, man. Thank you.
Now, if it was all like that, I haven't got a problem in the world with that. That's wonderful. You know, people, in a sense, it shows people saying like, you know, we've got problems with the police. We see police willing to say, yes, well, if there's a problem, let's do something about it. No one's got a problem with this, you know, except things change very quickly. So watch this next clip. Again, I'm showing you just complete raw clips. You may get bored of this. Fine, skip to the end, do whatever. I don't care. But if you want to get out of the propaganda mindset, I would suggest you watch the entire thing. Because you are addicted. It's like a junkie. You are getting the adrenaline rush of the news media interpreting everything for you. And what I'm trying to do is say, I just want you to watch this with your own eyes. So, consider being the driver in this next piece. It's people protesting, fine. But then what happens is, 2 cars go by, and then a third tries to kind of like make this turn, and then all hell breaks loose. And this is, again, near the beginning. Okay, so there you have it. That is not I mean, the minute they turned and chased that guy, we are out of the realm of peaceful protests. And if you go back and watch that carefully, you'll see someone stood in front of his car. They could have easily let him pass. They stood in front of the car, making it like, oh, you're trying to hit us? You're trying to hit us? And then suddenly it went from protest to hysteria. Unless there's another explanation for what I just saw there. I mean, go back and watch that footage. So, soon you start getting the images coming out of Portland, the same kind of images that we saw out of Minneapolis, of rioters and And then you start to see something really different. This does not fall under the category of protesting. This falls into a very different category. If you're under the opinion that running around knocking statues down is under the category of protesting, then I would say you don't understand. The First Amendment guarantees the right of peaceable assembly. It does not guarantee the right of riot. It does not guarantee the right of destruction of property. And there's been this weird thing going around with language lately where if silence is violence, but knocking over statues isn't. Don't know what that means. But check this out. This is from a local Portland news broadcast.
So check out this statue of Thomas Jefferson. You can see it's been toppled over and it's just on the cement right here. Again, we're just seeing this for the first time right now. This is not how it looked before we left for that peaceful march. We actually found out about it when we were marching with demonstrators. Someone told me, yeah, you're going to see something different when you get back.
So Thomas Jefferson gets knocked over because, yeah, he did have slaves. He has some flaws in his character, as everyone does, as every one of these protesters does. Well, let's go on. They didn't stop there. They then went on to, like, do strange things. There's an elk statue. Maybe it has some sort of weird symbolic meaning to these people, but they decided to go after the statue of an elk. So, the Portland authorities decided they couldn't let the poor elk statue. I mean, what you know, it's like we've seen Ulysses S. Grant, we've seen George Washington, we've seen Thomas Jefferson, we've seen an abolitionist statue all being knocked over. In Britain, we saw someone spray paint the word racist on a Churchill statue, and here we are seeing this. What is going on with these attacks on symbolic images, and why an elk? I mean, this at a certain point just seems like, again, there's a bubbling thing. I highly recommend reading Douglas Murray's recent book, The Madness of Crowds, where he discusses what happens when these things kind of bubble over into, it goes from being, it's amazing how quickly this can go from being just sort of a simmering event to being an explosion. Crowd psychology is very strange. And what we're looking at here is the Portland authorities decided to remove the poor elk statue, and this is what's left of it. But look at all the scrawls. And on some of these scrawls, you'll see this ominous date, 1619, because there's an entire conspiracy theory that America is basically a slaveocracy because the first slaves came in 1619. You know what? Yeah, our culture's got all sorts of things that are wrong with it, and slavery is certainly one of them. But that's a conspiracy theory, that this whole country is based on slaves and such. Just crazy. Okay, the next few I'm just going to let play, and this shows you, and again, this is all within the first month. This shows you continuing escalation. And I just want you to watch these. I'm not going to interpret them.
We got crime, nigga! They just did! unlawful assembly. Leave the area now, or you will be subject to uses of force to include riot control agents and impact munitions. Leave now.
Oh, that bitch Andy's gonna be here, so I'm gonna beat
his ass.
Andy,
No! Andy No's gonna be here? Not for long.
I need to say something about Andy No. Andy No is a gay second-generation Vietnamese immigrant family who has been doing reporting on what's been going on with Antifa in Portland over the last couple of years. He is like public enemy number one. They've already assaulted him, given him a bit of a brain hemorrhage. He's basically on their shit list. So they really hate him. And again, we're just going to watch. This is Portland. What's going on in Portland?
Holy, stop! He's done! Leave him alone!
nigga! Knocked his motherfucking ass out.
Try and get on your side.
Nigga,
Try and get on your side. Who is it? Try and get on your
he's
side.
sleeping on their ass. Nigga, don't come down here talking about Black Lives Matter, faggot. Get him up. Get him up. Black Lives Matter, you faggot.
Back up on that.
Are you okay? Get the hair. I don't even care what it stands for, but I'm not moving.
Man, you're lucky they're even taking care of you. Fuck are you running your mouth like that, man?
Running your mouth.
You know, this is the difference between us.
Stop.
We're helping you, all right?
You're running your mouth.
Do not protest against Black Lives, because guess what? We're showing up for you, even though you're being terrible to people.
Okay, ready?
All right?
That was a particularly violent one. Evidently, the guy probably said some sort of racial epithet, and so essentially then something happens. Something similar happens in the next video, which has no sound, but I'm just going to let it play. This was all just captured from a security camera. Again, probably a careless remark. Now, we switch to a different security camera in a moment. Well, maybe it's not a security camera. And they just keep pummeling the guy. It's hard to see where he is. He's about center right on the frame. And then he goes around the building. This is the kind of environment that Portland has been breeding. And then there have just been many fires throughout the city, particularly in the downtown section as we're getting closer to the federal courthouse. Not only that, but we've been seeing the use of commercial-grade fireworks against the police. This is all what the mainstream media is essentially calling peaceful protests.
Put that goddamn fire out. Black Lives Matter. Put that fire out on that black home business right there. That's where they get their fucking weed at.
Why would you do this, guys? I don't fucking care.
God damn it.
Put it out! Put it out!
This is the Portland Police. You are to disperse now. This is a Portland police bureau.
It's almost as if the city has come unhinged. And now, of course, you could be away from the center and be in a suburb of Portland or in the fringes and not see this. Although, if you try to drive by at certain points, you might get in trouble. But it's been one act of destruction after another. These are all just random videos that I've been collecting for the last couple of months. All of these well before the events that are the point of where I'm getting to here. Except for, I believe, the Naked Athena, as she's been dubbed, comes a bit later. Now, here you can start to see the escalation of tensions. Check out the store that's at the center of the screen here. Now we're going to watch a news broadcast from a local Portland station, and this announces to us the next phase in our media coverage here of looking for raw feeds. But let's look at the news broadcast from Portland.
Overnight, a riot again declared in downtown Portland as hundreds of demonstrators gather in front of the federal courthouse last night. Viewer video we obtained overnight shows people setting off fireworks in Chapman Square. And then later in the night, people could be seen throwing things and setting off fireworks towards the Justice Center. Eventually, protesters clashed with authorities after the federal courthouse door was shattered. Portland police ordered people to leave the area, threatening to use tear gas and other crowd control measures. Well, overnight, officers say they did not need to use tear gas. We are working to learn more about any arrests.
So, this is our first media reference to these fireworks. And I'm going to show you what the fireworks really look like when you're closer to them. Now, keep in mind, these are commercial-grade fireworks. And in fact, what we've been discovering since then, I'll see if I can find a photo of it for you here, is even more deadly improvised explosive devices. So let's see if I can find that photo. But meanwhile, this is what it looks like when you're in the middle of this thing. If you think that it's the federal troops that are doing all this, you really don't understand. You are being led, like the media narrative is that it's peaceful protesters, and then there was the invasion of the federal troops. That one guy said, some people have called it an invasion. He said that so he didn't get in trouble. Someone else did. We didn't say that, and that's another typical media thing. But let's watch. Okay, so now before the federal troops showed up, the police weren't exactly having a great rapport with the rioters.
This is the Portland Police Bureau. This is a civil disturbance and we have declared an unlawful assembly. Leave the area now or you'll be subject to use of force to include crowd control munitions. Leave now. If you're in the area of Southwest 3rd Avenue between Southwest Main Street and Southwest Madison Street, leave now.
And now here's something that everyone in America should have seen, and probably very few people did. And it was an interview with a black police officer talking about, his name is Jakari Jackson, and he's being interviewed about what happened on the streets of Portland with some of these rioters and with Antifa and these other people. And if you believe Antifa is a myth, you know what? I have the Tooth Fairy for you. I have Tinkerbell for you, because you're believing in some sort of strange myth. He's facing this. He's being told by other people that they're not allowed to talk with. He's not allowed to talk with any person of color. So let's listen to what he has to say. And Portland police officer Jakari Jackson, if you want the whole thing, it's around 25 minutes long. I've got about 10 minutes for you here, cut up into different pieces. You need to hear this, because this is what you are not getting on your nightly news supplements. And it is kind of not the interpretation that anybody wants you to have. Trust me, but I believe him. He strikes me as being a person of integrity. So listen to this.
Color, black, Hispanic, Asian, come up to the fence and directly want to talk to me. Hey, what do you think about George Floyd? What do you think about what happened about this? I go up to the fence, someone white comes up, F the police, don't talk to him. That was the most bizarre thing, because I could see it coming. I even had a young African American girl tell me, why is it you guys aren't talking to us? I said, honestly, this is now the 23rd day of doing it. Every time I try to have a conversation with someone that looks like me, someone white comes up and blocks them and tells them not to talk. And then right when I said that, this white girl popped right in front of her. She said, he just said that was going to happen. I said, told you. I told you. She looked at the girl and said, why'd you do that? And I straight up, I said, I've been called the N-word. She's been called the N-word. Why are you talking to me this way? And why do you feel that she can't speak for herself to me? Why is it that you feel you need to speak for her when we're having a conversation? And she couldn't answer my question. All she said was, someone told me to do it. And these folks don't even know what they're even doing, and so it's divisive. It's hurting the community. And I mean, I saw that press conference. Clearly, the community was not happy with that, and they even asked for the violence to stop. And they still are coming out and having these violent interactions with other citizens, the police. And at some point, you just go, what is the end goal? Bloody Sunday, Selma. Those folks marched because they wanted the right to vote. And they legitimately were beaten in the street for civil rights, to have rights that they were told they couldn't have because they were not even human. And then having folks scream and yell that they're being peaceful protests, but you're not peaceful because it is violent. And I actually had a cousin who went to one of the marches and he left. And he said, this has turned into something else. this is weird. So having an African American male marching and then leaving, like I said, it's been very eye-opening. But I did have great conversations. I met two young brothers who were literally, after I had taken an explosive, I had been hit with a full beer can, a rock in my chest, frozen water bottle had hit me. I met two young brothers that were out cleaning up the street. They had 2 garbage bags and they were just running and cleaning up. And a few of us from my team, we went over and we had to shake their hands. I was so moved by them and so impressed. And they said, you know, their words, we're from here. This is our city. Why I don't understand why people are coming here and destroying it. And we want to show that, you know, we want to clean it up. And I was absolutely, we let them take a picture with us. I didn't take a picture. They had their camera and they had a picture taken. But like I said, I was just so moved by that. It says something when you're at a Black Lives Matter protest. You have more minorities on the police side than you have in a violent crowd. And you have white people screaming at black officers. You have the biggest nose I've ever seen. And you hear these things and you go, where are these people are they gonna say something to this person? No. So, and that's just one example. Having people tell you, you know, what to do with your life, that you need to quit your job, that you need to, you know, you're hurting your community, but they're not even part of the community. And once again, you as a privileged white person telling someone of color what to do with their life. And you, absolutely, and you don't even know what I've dealt with, what these white officers that you're screaming at, you don't know them. You don't know anything about them. And there are racist people out in the world. Absolutely. There are bad cops out there in the world. We don't associate with those people. They make us all look bad. That's not something that I stand for. That's not something that my coworkers stand for. And, you know, I've been called on calls the N-word. I don't know. I can't even count in the time that I have been a police officer. And having white officers jump in and defend me and me telling them, you know, just ignore it. And them being absolutely shocked. And you really get, and they get to see it. And so, like I said, when you're standing on the line and they're getting called those names and they're being accused of being racist, when you've seen those officers helping people of color, getting blood on them, trying to save someone's life that's been shot, gang violence, domestic violence, and you see them and they're truly trying to help save someone's life, and then they turn around and are called a racist by people that have never seen anything like that have never had to put themselves out there. It's disgusting.
Meanwhile, back on the news.
Demonstrations overnight turned violent once again as crowds of people and federal officers squared off for hours downtown. The clashes involved tear gas and a fire. Fox 12's Amber Wilmarth has been covering this all morning for us and is in downtown Portland with a look at what it's like now.
In daylight, it's a much quieter scene here in downtown Portland. Right now, it appears groups are beginning to set up in the parks again, right across the street from the federal courthouse, which was at the center of last night's clashes. Fox 12's cameras were rolling as hundreds gathered outside the federal courthouse last night, sending a clear message to federal agents. Protesters telling them to go home. Demonstrations have been going on for more than 50 nights in Portland to stand against police brutality and racial injustice. But the focus now includes the federal agents' presence in the city. Last night, this group wearing yellow linked arms to create a wall of moms to shield protesters. As the night wore on, the clashes started. Portland police say the crowd began breaking down the fences in front of the courthouse. Police say federal agents went out to repair the fence and were met by protesters with hockey sticks and bats. Our crews were there as tear gas and rubber bullets started flying. The police bureau says those tactics were used by federal agents and added that its officers did not engage with the crowds last night. Shortly before 2 a.m., police say a group started a fire outside the courthouse and tampered with a security camera outside the Justice Center. Once again, federal officers used crowd dispersal tactics, then put out the flames. This morning, crews are once again cleaning up what's left over from the night before. As people set up in Lounsdale Square and Chapman Square parks, the city closed both parks last week, citing the need to make repairs after nights of protests and camping left behind damaged facilities. A spokesperson confirming with me that despite appearances, they're still closed today. Reporting in downtown Portland, Amber Wilmarth, Fox 12 Oregon.
And here is some footage of the federal soldiers on the streets of Portland, which does certainly have a menacing feel to it. And then we're going to let play probably the most controversial bit of footage related to this whole thing.
What are you doing? Use your words. What are you doing? Use your words. What are you doing?
I haven't done anything wrong.
Use your words.
What's going on, sir?
What is going on?
We need to know.
Who are you?
Why are you taking?
NLG will get you out. What's your name? Tell us your name.
What's your name?
Okay, you're fine. We'll get you out.
Bro, what?
We got you, friend.
We got you.
Oh, fuck.
NLG.
You just violated their rights.
Oh. Kidnapping people.
You just violated their rights.
Thanks for keeping the fucking. Oh.
That was a very strange bit of footage. Because the person who is narrating for you is what I'd call an unreliable narrator. She is, for instance, she's using this very strange phrase, use your words, use your words. Who says that? I mean, it's just a very strange construction. Most people say, hey, tell me, speak. So what's going on? That's what most people would say. But that has an ideological bent to it. Just this use your words. Like, you have language, you can use it. It's just like strange. But what's really strange is that there's no context involved in that footage. That is to say, you don't know what's going on. Essentially, this is the footage that essentially said to everyone, there's this and one other small clip, which essentially said to everyone, unidentified soldiers are whisking people away and taking them in unmarked cars. Well, first of all, if you go back and watch that, you'll see that this guy is marked. They certainly have identification badges, and we'll see exactly what those kind of badges are in a moment. Secondly, it's an unmarked car. Have you never heard of police having an unmarked car? Have you never heard of plainclothes policemen? This is not like some violation of the Constitution. This is, it's an unmarked car. So, but this brings us to the tactic of, which we heard about in the news broadcast, of the wall of moms. Well, for one thing, Andy No, dear old Andy No, who is absolutely loathed by Antifa, basically has said, I've seen a lot of these same faces wearing black. In other words, there were women wearing black who simply switched to yellow. Now, I'm sure they got some extra women as well. There are also women in the crowd who look like they're way below the age of where they would be having children and being mothers. That is to say, they just look like university students. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in here who have nothing to do with motherhood. So, a wall of moms, we'll put it in quotation mark, it's actually a very good strategy. And then they do this weird chanting.
Here we go. Hands up, please don't shoot me. 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 Hands up, please don't shoot
Now, I find this chant unnerving, but there's a really good reason why. Hands up, please don't shoot me. Da 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 da. Leonard Bernstein, in his Harvard lectures, I believe it's the very first lecture, discusses that chant. That is a sing-song chant used by children all over the world. It's almost a universal of some form of nya, 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 nya. And he talks about how musically it's this unresolved thing which kind of gets under your skin. And he says it's pretty close to a universal worldwide. So what you're hearing is these women chanting this weird juvenile taunt song over and over, and there's even a kind of a drum track. I don't know if it's an actual drummer or a drum track playing. And this is evidently, I would love to have footage of this going on for probably as long as it goes on. They're in front of the federal building just going, yeah, 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 yeah. But they put the words, hands up, please don't shoot me, because they know there's nothing the federal officers can do. But again, the interpretation is that it's you have these dear mothers who are trying to protect the peaceful protesters. Whereas, in fact, as the next clip shows, we've got some yellow moms helping out with, standing around watching explosions happening in front of their eyes by the same peaceful protesters. And this is what the federal building will look like on, I don't know which night, at some point after. This was before, however, they put up a fence around it. But essentially, this became just like the locus of the rioters' hatred. Why? Because it represents the United States government. If you remember in the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, there was at the beginning a sign saying, when you cross this barrier, you're leaving the United States. There is a definite thing here, and if you think I'm making this up, you really need to do your homework, where it's It's definitely like we're not Americans anymore. We are, I don't know what, some global kind of thing. Imagine there's no countries. Eventually, the U.S. government had to come out and say something about what's going on. So here we have the official explanation from the feds about what's going on. And what you'll understand, unless you completely disbelieve what you're seeing here, this is exactly how these people are marked. And the reason they don't have their name tags is because one of the newest tactics of the Antifa extreme left is to dox people to get their information out so people can come to their houses. And now imagine you were one of them. Would you like a mob of protesters, rioters at your house? I think not.
I pulled two headlines before coming down here today. One, U.S. official calls protest anarchist. Inaccurate and very misleading. Individuals trying to set fire to a building are no longer protesting. They are criminals. I, or any other senior official at the department, has no problem with peaceful protesters. Said that a couple of times, I'll say that again. Second headline, unidentified federal agents are detaining protesters in Portland. Again, inaccurate and false. As you've heard I say, you'll hear Acting Commissioner Morgan say, all officers are identified as police law enforcement officers.
There has been a tremendous amount of false information out there. I've seen news reporting after news reporting, tweet after tweet saying, quote, unidentified, masked stormtroopers. Again, I want to foot stomp on the secretary said. It is offensive to refer to these dedicated men and women that are out there as law enforcement professionals to make that reference. It is disgusting. And it's also a lie. As we can see, we've shown you time and time again. So you saw the markings that Deputy Director Klein put out. I wanted to blow that up to show you. Our BORTAC agents, for example, this is the identification every single one of them has on their uniform. And this is a baseline. I wanted to bring a real live version. This is what they're wearing. This is a real live version of what they're wearing. And this is a baseline of all the different identifications that they have. So first and foremost, you see clearly marked that they are part of the Customs and Border Protection. The second line of marking is it shows the component within CBP that they're associated with. In this instance, Border Patrol. Clearly police. It's marked on the front and the back. Clearly, every single agent. In addition to that, they have a unique identifier. Deputy Director Klein said he doesn't have his officers wear name tags because they're being doxxed. That's exactly right. That's another thing that's absolutely disgusting. So they're not only jeopardizing the lives of the agents, but they're also jeopardizing the lives of their families as they're putting out their home information and they're suggesting that individuals go to their homes.
So all of this stuff started happening. You have these nights of protest. You have the moms, you have the federal troops and such. You have the legend of the unmarked van, which turns into the secret police force. I'll let Tim Poole explain that in a moment. And a friend of mine, whose name I will shield you from, decided that essentially, and he certainly wasn't the only one, he's getting his news from who knows where. One thing is spread, it's like a game of telephone where this all just changes. But here's the screed that he had on his, here's the screed that he put on Facebook, and I want you to notice at the bottom that he's got lots of people liking this, getting angry, and then it being shared lots of times. This is just one person out of thousands and thousands who are spreading information this way. Of course, there's a photo of the Nazis, but that looks like it's from a movie, really, because when would a soldier in World War II be standing in front of officers with guards taking photos like that? And then the second one is an actual World War II photo. But it hits an emotional thing. So all you have to do now is say the legend of there were peaceful protesters. There is the secret federal troops. Well, what's the secret? Everyone knew they were there. They were all marked, actually, and then they're all really Nazis. And then you just say that over and over to yourself, and you believe it. Where for over a month, the protesters have been anything but peaceful. And essentially, you have this scenario where it's just like propaganda feeding on propaganda. And in fact, the mayor of Portland, who seems to be kind of in on the thing, is basically saying, well, I'll just let him speak.
The words and actions from President Trump and the Department of Homeland Security have shown that this is an attack on our democracy. I stand with our senators, representatives, and our state, county, and city leaders in denouncing their presence. Over the past week, President Trump has used our city as a staging ground to further his political agenda, igniting his base to cause further divisiveness, and in doing so, endangering Portlanders.
So essentially, it's kind of like he's not admitting anything is happening. So to prove his point, he goes out into the street, and I'm just going to let these next couple of clips play because he gets gassed, but he doesn't seem to be particularly appreciated by the protesters.
We just asked that you demonstrate.
Fuck you!
Fuck you, Ted Wheeler! Demonstrate. Hey, check this out.
Fuck Ted Wheeler!
What's the question?
Fuck Ted Wheeler! Ban the police and quit your job, Ted! Ted, we're not voting for you. We're not voting for you.
That's what a flashbang feels like, Teddy.
Are you ready for it, Ted?
That's the feds. That is the feds. Pepper balls and tear gas. The mayor of Portland. There it is. Ted. Those are the feds, Ted. The fucking feds. Right there. Pointing guns at you.
You're Justice
They're pointing fucking guns at you. What are you gonna do?
You're Justice Ted!
That's the fucking feds shooting at the mayor of Portland. What are you gonna do? Nothing. That's you. Nothing.
Wait a little bit, boy. Wait a little bit.
Win your job! 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 Everybody, please! We gotta let the man talk. Everyone back. Whiskey is getting knocked out. First of all, I want to thank tens of thousands of Portlanders who've come out straight in support of racial justice and equity. I want to thank the thousands who've come out to oppose the Trump administration's occupation of our city. The reason this is important is because it's not just happening. It is an unconstitutional occupation. The tactics that are being used by our federal officers are abhorrent. They do not act with probable cause. People are not being told who they are being arrested by, and they're being denied basic constitutional rights. I understand that. You're all entitled to.
How's that now? How is that? How is that? You should feel their students. How is it now? They learned that. Take a breath, man. They learned that. Fucking sit with that, man. You should stay in there, Chad. Get your knees in that 59. You should stay in there.
Okay.
And so what has been going on? Well, the same night that, I think this was July 23rd, the same night Ted Wheeler went out there, you have footage of them like, I mean, they're just getting, I mean, if I was one of those soldiers inside, I'd be pretty worried about what's happening. Interestingly enough, these people are still like LARPing. It's live action role playing. They're playing at Revolution. But what it is they keep getting more and more and more. Now, is everyone doing this? No. Some people are quite clearly coming there, taking, with their cameras just to get video, because what a spectacle. Also, there are people who, like, we'll see this one guy at the beginning carrying a American flag, and he's more of a conservative guy, more of a libertarian. He's kind of like, yeah, we're all in this country. And, but there's someone next to him just wearing a black mask and goggles who's kind of like, no, and then there's a black guy who comes around. He's saying, oh, what are you doing? This has nothing to do with being black. This is an extended clip, but I want you to understand what is going on here. So just watch this. I want you to get a full taste of the craziness and insanity going out in front of the federal building. You will notice there's no troops here right now. It's just the protesters being nuts.
Yeah, and if they want to fuck me up while I hold this flag, so fucking be it. No. Nope, this is my country. This is our country. Every motherfucking one of you is an American. I back all of you.
I think what he's trying to say is we're all together against them.
Yeah, we're together. Thank you.
We have yeah. We all have the same enemy. Same enemy. Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah. We all have the same enemy. You know?
Yeah, we're all done. We're done, man.
Oh, the door's open. Door's open.
Fence is open down there, too.
Oh, it's open? All right, word. Fence is open out. The fence is open down here. People are now getting on the inside. I'm about to hop over myself. Oh, it's open over here. All right, bird. All right, guys, we're gonna go take a walk through the federal building. Watch out, dog. Watch out, dog. Sorry, dog. Hell yeah! So now we're inside the barricade. This is an Allen Port exclusive. We're inside the barricade, and the federal government is going to come right out of those doors and
make a hole.
We are on the other side of the fence. With only a few protesters. This is a really bad spot to be in because the federal government can come out of the building anytime and grab us. We'll walk a little more here. The doors are open. They're not coming?
It's been open the whole time.
Oh, okay, I didn't know, sorry. I ain't getting trapped in there, dog. I ain't getting trapped in there.
Are they cops there?
I heard them whistling.
I heard a whistle. I don't know if it's them or not.
I mean, I ain't getting fucking shot, dog. I heard a whistle. All right, man. See you later.
They keep repeating the same shit on the speaker, but
I know, but we're on the inside now. Like, you know they're coming out, man.
nah, they can't come out.
So all the people starting the fucking fire are white? Are fucking white? Wake up! Soros is paying white people to burn this shit down to make black people look bad. These white people are burning this shit down. That guy right there, y'all gotta stop him. You gotta stop him. They're gonna burn down this courthouse and they're gonna blame the black people.
Guys,
White
there's
people.
no reason
They're
to get
gonna
shot.
blame the black people. You gotta stop that white man. Y'all gotta stop him.
I don't know if I'll be able to get back in there, but
I think we
Look,
should.
you see a single black man in there. You even see one
Can we
black-
chant no fire? Anyone who's not okay with this, chant no fire. No fire.
oh, sorry.
They're out. They go out. That's too big.
Even now, you're watching white people burn down
trying to
shit.
stop it early.
You're watching white people burn down shit. It's black people who are gonna have to take the blame. Stop letting them do this shit. Why the fuck are you just watching? How is that okay? They're gonna say Black Lives Matter did that. I'm not even with Black Lives Matter. I don't even agree with it. But y'all should have some common sense. Show them. Show them. Look at the white. Look at what the white people. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was a public place. If you don't agree with the movement, why are you out here? I'm sorry, is this the movement right there? Is that the movement? No, but you just said you're not. I wanted to listen to y'all. I can still listen, right? I'm still a black man. I was listening to talk earlier. I talked to the mayor earlier, okay? But I did not think, yes I did. I can show you the video. But I did not think that this was gonna happen. I did not think this shit was gonna happen. I would not even be here if I known this shit was gonna happen. Because I'm trying to convince people this shit's not okay. I mean, no one should be doing it. If you're not here to support, I'd be here for any fucking reason. I'm here any fucking reason. Aside from burning this fucker down, I can be here for any reason aside from burning shit down, committing crimes, breaking people's shit, stealing people's shit. How many fucking people are in prison in there, man? How many fucking people? Well, you're about to light them on fire if you're about to burn the bitch down, right? We need to free those motherfuckers. What are you talking about? Have a broader mindset, man. There are people. Oh, it's another white man lecturing a black man. How amazing. White people are burning down a building. How amazing. Wake the fuck up.
The dude throwing trash on the fires from Detroit, and he's got a beef with his 6 years behind
brothers and sisters. They kill brothers and sisters. They rob brothers and sisters. They kill brothers and sisters. They didn't kill anyone in there. They can't be dead in prison. You're gonna free them.
Do you guys know how many people are in there?
How many people are in there?
Like, how many? I'm not from here. I just want to know how many people they arrested. That's all.
So, dude, all of these jails have people in there. We need to get those people out of there. That's what this is all about. We need to liberate these fucking places. We need to take down these structures that are imprisoning people. That's what's fucking horrible right now.
Yeah, it's a white man speaking for the black people. Get the fuck out. Stop telling black people to do shit that's gonna get thrown in prison. You're trying to get black people to go in and get them thrown in prison. There's already enough black people suffering. No more violence. If you want to speak to the mayor, you can speak to the mayor. If you invite the police to speak to you, they will speak to you. Stop burning shit down. Stop breaking shit. I will talk to anyone.
Excuse me, sir.
That's not the answer. You want a conversation? Have a conversation.
Excuse me. Would you happen to know how many people are in custody by the federal government?
I do not know. Probably too many. But guess what? When you do this shit, it's going to be even more. It's going to be even more. This is not the way.
And you would say...
We can talk about finding the right way. I'd love to, but this is not right.
You would say that love is the strongest force on earth, and love is the only force that can turn an enemy into a friend, correct?
Yeah, and also common sense. Let's have some common sense. Want to set up a table? Let's talk. I'll talk to y'all about anything. I'll answer any question. I will debate anyone. And I'll be cool. I won't get mad at you unless you do this shit. I'll talk to anyone here. I will debate anyone here. over anything. Invite them out to talk to you. Invite them out to talk to you.
We've been trying to talk to them.
Well, you sat down and said talk. You're making them your enemy. Do they tell you? You're saying they're your enemy. They're not saying that you're their enemy. You're making them your enemy. You can't make them. You're gonna make them. They don't care about us. She doesn't want to talk to me. You don't want to talk.
Use this
No, they use I get it. They gave you a hard time, right? They shot you, right? It makes you upset. I'd be upset too if I got shot. You have to have the courage to just calm down and find a better way. You're about to get shot again. You're about to get shot again.
They're gonna walk all over us if we let it go.
We're not gonna walk you all over and let it go. I'm with you. All these people, look, you feel like you're alone? You really feel like you're alone?
Do you feel like
But the people in there are doing what's
like
right.
what you're talking about is what most of them want, though?
I actually do. At least half the people here. Why not talk? You don't even know these people. Y'all know each other's names? You don't. You don't even know what you're doing. You see one person start burning shit down, and then more people start doing it, but no one even comes to burn shit down, except for these Soros-paid fucking anarchists. Soros! Fuck you, Soros! Seriously, stop. Stand up, tell people what's wrong. You also gotta tell black people when they're doing something wrong. That's the difference in the black community. We're not held accountable. No one tells us to do better. No one tells us when we fail. No one tells us when we did something wrong. No one, no politician, no person, not even ourselves. If you want to be respected, if you want our lives to matter, we gotta make it matter by telling people to not do that.
Oh, they're out. 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 All right. They're coming. They're coming. They're coming. They're coming. They're coming.
Walk, don't run! Walk, don't run!
Federal government has just exited the building. They're deploying stun grenades, smoke.
And this is, I believe, from the 24th of July. And again, this is the night our friend Chris David got batoned by the federal troops, which we are coming to. I haven't forgotten the point of this whole thing. My point has not been to say, look at what's happening in Portland. My point has been to say, if you want to interpret this 1 30-second clip, you need a little background. And the background is, it ain't peaceful protest. These are rioters. In fact, rioters are like just like a temporary thing. These are like insurrectionists. They don't want, they're tired of being called Americans. They're tired of everything that America seems to stand for. And I'm not saying this as a political thing. This seems to be what they're actually against. This is why it's the guy carrying the flag is such an interesting thing. He's trying to make the circle bigger, which is the way to do it. But instead, a lot of them aren't having it. But let's watch this. And I've got a couple of other clips here. I just want you to get a taste of what the 24th is like. So I'm going to play a good chunk of clips. Again, why am I playing you the whole thing? Again, I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to watch the video footage. This is how I'm assembling what I'm seeing. This is not, who knows who took this video footage? Sometimes it's people who are the protesters themselves. Other times it's people who are just lookers on. Other times it's people who are rarely the active rioters because they've got other fish to fry, but sometimes it seems to be someone very closely related to them. So let's watch this stuff.
Now y'all know. Now y'all know. As soon as I flash the light at y'all, y'all gonna shoot her.
Shut the fuck up right now! Shut the fuck up and you listen to me!
So yeah, the feds had to come out. They're inside. People are lighting fires. They've got to do something. What are you going to do? I'm not saying I'd like to be one. Not saying I want to go out there clubbing people. I'm not saying that's a good thing to do. I'm saying people are being pushed into corners. And part of who's most just responsible for all of this is the media itself. They keep hitting the drum beats. They want some sort of, they want good news. It makes money for them. And then check this guy out talking. He was in the middle of things, and then there was a stabbing. Peaceful.
All right, you guys, I'm sitting in the car right now. I've never seen so many federal agents and police in my fucking life. My friend is hidden behind these cars. There's so many people here. He got fucking stabbed by Antifa, and I tried to tell them that this dude was following us. As soon as my friend turned around, this dude stabbed him, tried to run. I'm hearing things that he got beat to death or something and that he got arrested. There's a lot of stuff going around. I'm in shock mode right now, and just pray for me and pray for my friends, please. God bless.
And here's footage. There's someone waiting with a hammer for the first soldier who comes out of this door. So yeah, I mean, if somehow you're putting this all under the category of the protesters good, the feds bad, I would say you really have a problem. But I don't blame you because you haven't been getting this footage. This footage is essentially denied to you.
Protesters, this is an unlawful assembly. You must
Get out! Hey! Come upstairs! Get behind you! Hey! Get out! Get out! It's over. I don't want you.
Oh, here we go. It looks like glass projectiles are being thrown at the police.
Yeah, don't forget the rubber. Watch your stick!
So now we're going to go back to Mr. Chris David and the event that happened. Let's watch what happened according to CNN.
And this disturbing video shows the agents beating a Navy veteran with batons and then dousing him with pepper spray when he says that he was trying to engage them in a civil conversation.
So this brings us to the 30-second clip of what's happening to Chris David, the veteran. And I think as we look at this, we will get a better picture. Again, I'm not trying to justify the guys hitting him with a baton. Not a good thing to do. But I want you to understand why, from my opinion, it seems to have happened. And it's not nearly what the media is showing you. So let's start with CNN again and show you what you would have seen mainstream media.
And this disturbing video shows the agents beating a Navy veteran with batons and then dousing him with pepper spray when he says that he was trying to engage them in a civil conversation. That Navy veteran, Chris David, is joining me now.
So she's telling you what you're seeing as it's happening. This is like classic misdirection. She is saying that essentially he comes up to them, tries to have a civil discussion, they turn around and beat him. Now, the one thing that's really not included here, for one thing, she's not letting you just watch the footage, because that can't happen on mainstream media. You can't just watch the footage. You have to have an interpretation of it. But secondly, there's no sound really on the footage. And once you understand the sound, then it makes more sense. But let's hear his description of what's going on.
I wanted to see if I could have a civil discussion with these federal agents, officers, and ask them why they felt that it was okay what they were doing, that I felt that they were violating their oath to the Constitution.
Let's stop it right there. So, he just wants to ask them about what they're doing. Well, he's not just wanting to ask them. He wants to come up and tell them they're wrong. Okay? So, he's, now what's happened is Chris David seems to be the kind of person who watches CNN regularly. So, his whole interpretation is that there is no reason for them to be there, and they need to, they're violating the Constitution. Meanwhile, they're trying to protect a federal courthouse, which is a United States federal building. This is not property of any state. This is owned by the entire country. So, the federal marshals and Custom Border Patrol agents who are there are representing the entire country. It would be like someone telling you you can't protect your own house because that's a violation of something. It's not. You have the right to protect your own house. But his attitude, there's something about it that strikes me as weird. Let's listen to a little more.
And so what I did in preparation for that, I put on my Naval Academy sweatshirt, my Navy wrestling hat, and my backpack, all my CB patches, under the presumption that they would respect that and maybe talk to me instead of treat me as some other protester. That didn't work out at all.
Okay, he seems to mean well. He seems to think in his, and I think he genuinely believed this, that he was going to go up to them, maybe have a discussion, get them to realize that, hey, the oath that we took prevents us from doing this kind of action. I think he doesn't understand the nature of the situation, but that's what's going on in his mind. Again, he's going off of the media reports saying that this is an invasion that has nothing, but what's happened is Portland has just been erupting and bubbling and bubbling. And it's clear that if these federal troops leave, the rioters are going to go in and destroy the federal courthouse. Can the U.S. government allow that to happen and still claim any validity as a government that protects its own? That is a larger question.
You had a signal for them as you turned away, but you walked away from them as they were beating you. Tell us what is the damage here?
Well, just a bunch of bruises otherwise, but they did pretty much smash my hand up quite a bit with their batons. So I've got a couple fractures in this hand. One of them's pretty serious, so I'm going to have surgery to have that.
It's interesting in the MSNBC interview, which may have happened after this one, he's upped it from fractures to broken. I have no idea, but the point is this: we don't know. One thing they keep doing during the whole discussion is they keep repeating those short 2 clips over and over and over, drilling them into your head. Okay, so this is Ken Cuccinelli, who we saw earlier talking, and again, they've got him commenting on this without, for instance, he hasn't even heard the sound. And notice the fact that he says it's important that he hears the sound, nor has he heard back from the federal officers. Why is the sound so important here?
You have there is Marshal Service folks. You don't have DHS officers. I'm familiar with the video you're talking about. And all I have is the video that I've seen. I haven't seen either the audio or the reports of officers.
So this is the point at which, the one guy kept saying, but based on what you see, Well, the point with any video clip is there's always much more than what you see. For one thing, the clip may be longer, a lot longer. For another thing, what's happening on the sides? What's happening behind the person taking the film? They've only got one small view, so they can't tell you everything. There may be other things going on. This is interesting because it's a photo, actually. This is from the MSNBC report. This is a photo that is not included in an angle in either of the 2 other clips. Now, he's wearing a mask. They are wearing full gas masks. He's coming up to them and wants to talk. Is this the best time to have a discussion with someone? That's the question I want to ask. Is this the best time to have a discussion with someone? I would say absolutely not. It's the worst time on earth to have a dialogue. And who can you even talk to? Everyone's wearing masks, So, okay, well, let's watch the MSNBC footage. And here's what I want you to notice as we are watching the MSNBC footage. Listen to what I said about the sound. We're going to pick up on that in a minute.
A 53-year-old Naval Academy graduate named Chris David. That's him in the sweatshirt, the Navy sweatshirt. This military veteran was so disturbed by the images of federal agents throwing protesters into unmarked cars that he took it upon himself to visit the protests on Saturday night, to talk to those agents, to ask them what they're thinking, why they're doing this. This video is of Mr. David approaching federal agents to talk to them, upholding their oath, asking him about upholding their oath to the Constitution. Look what they do to him. They beat him. Warning, this is disturbing.
By the way, that warning, this is disturbing, they're telling you how you should feel about this. So, and they're not helping you. Now, interestingly enough, they just gave you a bit longer of the clip than CNN did. And that ends up being very important. But let's watch, and again, listen for the sound that's coming. Oh my goodness. Is that different when you add the sound? So there's a guy who comes up to these officers who are wearing gas masks, and he just wants to have a discussion while literally the entire world is blowing up around him. Is this the best time to have a discussion? When you add the sound, this guy seems tremendously self-possessed and full of himself, thinking he's going to, what, is he going to get the guys to put down their weapons and go home? What is he thinking? He can't even talk to them. They can't talk to him. They're wearing masks. What is he thinking? Okay, well, let's look for more information.
Look at that guy beating on him. Mr. David, as you can see, never flinched while he was being struck with the baton. They finally sprayed him in the face. Joining me now is that Navy veteran, Chris David.
By slowing it down, actually the slowing it down doesn't make it better. But the point is, the guy seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And this is what the footage shows. I did find the raw footage, and let me go over it a bit with you. Okay, here's something you may not have noticed. Do you see the fire behind them? Do you see that? That fire is not there. They didn't light a fire. They're not sitting around it trying to get warm. Okay, so you get the full him flipping the finger at them. So that fire is really important. Secondly, you hear the explosion. The guy basically starts beating him the second after the explosion. I mean, it's literally the explosion, then bam. I am sure that it was so loud at that moment. We're talking, practically military grade fireworks going on here. This huge explosion comes, and this poor, rather confused, I'm sure, federal officer suddenly just goes like, get out of here. I am sure what happened is that he went up to them to try to talk, and they're saying, sir, can you please step away? Can you back off? And he's not moving. This is not the same interpretation as what's going on. This is what you see. Let's watch a little more. Oh, can we see that again? Okay, let's do that one more time. I want you to notice what's happening. First of all, a rocket, some sort of lit fire comes right before he shows up there. They're practically standing on it. Then there's smoke. Some of that may be their own tear gas, but it could be smoke bombs. I don't know. It's total chaos. You can hear the crowd crying out. There's rioting going on everywhere. And this guy wants to have a calm conversation at this moment. Watch again. Now there's another clip here that I want to show you, and I want you to watch it carefully. This is the second of the clips. There's actually a third clip that I show you just a piece of coming up here, of him walking away. But in this clip, something kept standing out to me, and it's that the guy there's a guy standing next to him who's getting sprayed. And I looked at that for a while. It's a big spray of yellow, whatever, pepper spray, bear spray, I don't know. But these guys are all standing there, and this guy is not alone. There's another guy standing next to him who has done something to so irritate these people that they blasted him before the explosion. What could they have been talking about? No idea. But do you think that the federal officers distinguish between the two men? I would say they can't. It's just too chaotic. Watch it one more time. Let me just do it slowly. Watch the man in blue. Who is he? We don't have his story. These federal troops are in panic mode. Bombs are literally dropping. Fire is showing up right behind them. And this guy just wants to talk. And I'm sure they're just like, you got to get out of here. And they're pushing him away. No, it's not good what they're doing. But they're freaked out, just as you would be. Put yourself in their place for 5 minutes. A guy is coming up, wants to have a political discussion with you, wants to say, why are you violating your oath? He's talking behind a mask. You're kind of surrounded by this stuff. Is this the interpretation? Oops, this doesn't meet anyone's real narrative, does it? And that's the problem with, that's what propaganda does. The propaganda is how the media is interpreting all this stuff. But what you're seeing is just craziness. You know, and you know what? I think the lesson I get here is a good time to talk to someone is not when they are being attacked. It would be like, I mean, literally, those guys are under fire. This guy comes up and wants to have a rational discussion. I think the guy was very naive, and he also seems to have, some sort of political agenda he's trying to get across. He wants to prove a point. And I'm sorry, I'm not with the federal troops here, but I'm not with this guy either. And so it's just, so for that, 30 seconds of video, there were two different images. We just see this absolute insanity going on. And that's what's really happening. It isn't that the federal troops have invaded Portland. It's that that the center of Portland is like a bubbling cauldron. And yeah, if you live in Portland, maybe you can drive around it. But you don't want to get anywhere near guys throwing garbage cans into the street and pushing stuff in. You don't want to get anywhere near the protesters here, because the rationality has flown out the window. And that is the message I get. The latest tactic has been to use laser beams and to focus them on people's eyes. And here, this is actually, I believe, Andy No's own footage. He's there. They see him there. They hate him. And so they're trying to blind him with laser beams. Some cops have been blinded by these laser beams and hurt quite seriously by them. These are not peaceful protests. This is not what's covered in the U.S. Constitution. U.S. Constitution handles what we saw at the very beginning, years ago it seems. But it doesn't cover bringing military-grade equipment, professional-grade fireworks, homemade explosive devices, knocking down fences, attacking things, starting fires in the middle of the street. If you think it does, well, I really don't think, I don't think you want that in your neighborhood, do you? We're going to end up here with Tim Pool. Tim Pool is a fascinating character. He's an independent journalist. He was at Occupy Wall Street and was live streaming from there. One of the first people to do this. Now it's pretty common to see this sort of thing happening all the time. So, for instance, on the first night in Minneapolis, when the George Floyd protests were started, I was also watching the rioting live streamed. So whenever anyone told me, it's like, yeah, it's basically people just peaceful protesting, I was going like, have you not been watching anything? No. If you're watching the mainstream media, it's all being cut up and minced and diced and served to you on a platter. Beware the soundbite. Beware the interpretation. By the way, so when you watch the media, when you watch the news, be aware of the 3 following items: the editing, the sound, and the narration. The editing, the sound, and the narration. And occasionally what you're looking at. Because here's the thing. They totally disguised what was going on with the Chris David incident. By editing, particularly CNN, they just even omitted all the sound. Context, no context. It's just the narration is one way only. And, of course, it's just, it's served up to you. Be aware of what you're watching. This is why visual literacy is so important. If you have some visual literacy, if you understand, you should really study the kinds of things the effects of various sorts of edits and cuts and sound effects and music on films. Once you understand that, you are able to pick apart what you're looking at better. I say better, but not completely. We are all dragged by this stuff wherever it wants to take us. So, I do want to end with a couple of clips by Tim Pool. Tim Pool is a independent journalist. He was at Occupy Wall Street. He was live streaming from there. And then he noticed when Occupy Wall Street went from being the legitimate protest, questioning a lot of what happened with the financial scandal in 2008, 2009, into being taken over by the ideologues, the intersectionals. And as he saw that, he himself had kind of a wake-up moment where he realized that everything is not as they say. So I'm going to let him talk to you here about what. First of all, I'm going to show you a recent clip from him. Today is July 31st, so this was a little less than a week ago, where he's talking about what happened last weekend on the 23rd, 24th.
Last night in Portland was one of the craziest nights we have seen yet. The violence is only escalating. The DOJ has announced 18 people are being charged federally with crimes: arson, assault on an officer. And here's what you can get from the media. All in with Chris Hayes, Mehdi Hassan. It's time we use the F word. Fascism. Oh, now's the time we use the word fascism. I just happened to think you've been, my understanding was that you've been using the word endlessly for the past 5 years. Fascism. They use it every single election cycle. Whenever a Republican is running, the Republican is a fascist, blah, blah, blah. Look, I got to be honest. What's going on in Portland is getting, I don't want to say boring, but yeah. And this is how the news cycle works. So I want to talk to you about what happened with these stabbings and go through the evidence. But I want to point out some very important things. The reason the media hasn't been covering, say, the mass riots that just happened in Seattle. Did you know about them? If you've been following my videos, you probably do. 150 people showed up at Cal Anderson Park, where the Chaz used to be, and then went around smashing up windows and buildings. There was an explosion. And the Seattle police recently just told all of the people of Seattle, because they're expecting riots tonight, you're on your own. You know why? Because the judge has said you can't use riot control munitions. So the cops are like, we're not going to go out if we can't do anything, so it's on you. A federal judge is now blocking this, apparently saying, no, you guys can do this. Tell them to shut up. We'll see how things play out. But it's getting spicy. It is. There's right now in Louisville, Kentucky, 3 percenters, and you've got the NFAC coalition, 2 opposing militias. They're counter marching, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if they're protesting, but things are getting really, really spicy.
So essentially what Tim Pool has been doing, now he's also been to Tahrir Square during the Islamic Spring. He's been to, was he in Venezuela? Maybe. He's been to Baltimore when it erupted. He was at the Ferguson thing. He's been all over. And he has a very good nose for when the media is going fake. And so what I'm going to let him do here is I'm going to let him explain from his perspective, and this will take a few minutes, but I want you to really hear what he is saying. He's going to explain why the whole thing with the unmarked vehicle ended up becoming secret police. And this is classic, but he explains how it happened. And I couldn't do a better job of explaining than him, and I would recommend watching him. I'm not saying Tim Pool is unbiased. He certainly is biased. But what's happened is he's also very honest, and he changes his mind. He said, oh, I thought it was this, it was that. Sometimes he stammers and blusters. But the guy is essentially, he's like, you can't slip by him just bullshit. He really is watching very carefully what things are happening. So if you're looking for him to vet your own personal, people on the right and on the left get upset with him because he just goes his own road. And I think that's fine. Give him a listen. This is a very good explanation of how the media goes from that one incident of an unmarked van to a whole entire secret police force. And it's a game of telephone.
First, let me show you this story from the Washington Post, because I think it's appropriate considering what we just saw from the other Washington Post story. They say, it was like being preyed upon. Portland protesters say federal officers in unmarked vans are detaining them. Wow. Sounds scary, sounds crazy. Unmarked vans. Here's where the story begins. Let me read it. Federal customs officials said Friday their agents had detained a demonstrator in Portland in a widely seen video circulating online that showed two men in apparent military garb taking a young man wearing all black into custody, defending the apprehension by describing the man as being suspected of attacking federal agents and property. The defense came as federal authorities were under criticism for their tactics from elected officials. In a statement Friday, CBP said its agents had taken the action in the video and that they had information indicating the person in the video was suspected of assaults against federal agents or destruction of federal property. Notice how the story that first emerged just said unmarked vans. That's true. The vans are not marked. How then did the story start to evolve from unmarked vehicles to secret police force? NPR saying, grabbing unmarked people. Then we see CNN mysterious arrest video with unidentified police. Whoa, wait a minute. At first, we knew they were police. Now they're unidentified police. And it evolves. Unidentified federal officers are scooping up protesters in Portland. Are other cities next? Wait, what do you mean are other cities next? This is just happening in Portland. And they're not unidentified federal officers. They were just in an unmarked van. They're clearly marked as police. Do you see how that evolution happened? The first story says unmarked vehicles. They then say unidentified police, admitting we know that they are police. But which agency, which badges? Now, this is actually a lie. We know what agency. They're wearing the patches on their arms. We can see it in the videos. It then becomes unidentified federal officers, still in the realm of police. Then it's Homeland Security was destined to become secret police. Then, barely worth a discussion, the DHS official dismisses uproar over use of unmarked vehicles in Portland. You see how the story just keeps moving on and evolving. And then we come to one of the latest pieces by Vox, the crisis of the Republican Party. How did we go from two viral videos of cops using a long-standing tactic of unmarked vehicles? It happens everywhere across this country, with clearly identifiable patches on their arms and police on their chest. Yes, they have badge numbers. To all of a sudden, it's the Republican Party. This is why Donald Trump and many others say the press is the enemy of the people. I do not believe that many of the journalists who are doing this realize they're doing it. I think many of them are completely inept. They see a story and the language changes. One story going back 2 weeks persists to this day. New stories get written over and over again, where now, a week later, having only 2 video clips of identifiable DHS police officers becomes a crisis of the Republican Party on July 24th, where they literally say in the piece, they say, in both cases referring to Reconstruction, it was uniformed soldiers, not unidentified state security forces, from an alphabet soup of obscure DHS agencies. They were being used to protect moves towards racial progress. They say, outside of Northern Ireland, there is no example of state security forces being deployed under circumstances like this in any democratic state. This is an op-ed piece that is just taking all of the fake news that's been written by a ton of people, and they've pushed the story to its extremes. information laundering. What started as someone wearing a helmet in all black who was suspected of engaging in rioting being questioned for but an hour and a half turns into Trump's secret police. But hold on. A judge denied the Oregon Attorney General's motion to restrict federal police actions. Why? Because as it turns out, the judge says they were clearly identified as police. He says in both instances of a federal seizure, it is either admitted or clearly visible that the agent's uniforms say police. Beyond the two examples, the state failed to show that the federal officers were involved in any widespread unlawful practice or that others would be harmed in the future. It has presented no evidence of any official orders or policies and has presented no evidence that these allegedly illegal seizures are a widespread practice. Despite the broad language in the complaint, Oregon has shown at most that this type of seizure has happened twice. And what? The people were detained, that's it? So why is the media pushing the lie? I'll tell you.
Okay, I don't know if you agreed with anything that he said. By the way, you should watch him if you're interested in getting a different perspective on the news, because he's good at calling them on their hypocrisy. But I don't know if you agreed with anything I said. I don't know if you, maybe you know me and you say, well, what's happened to Byrne? He's gone full crazy. No, I haven't. I've been watching actual footage and coming up with my own interpretation. And my own interpretation does not square with anyone's political views. I'm not in favor of any sort of police state. I'm not in favor of any sort of political takeovers by anybody. I'm not in favor of the new ideologues on the left. My feeling is, that we need to be very cautious to where we are going at this time, if it's not already too late. But the point is this. Do not make propaganda. Do not spread propaganda. Do not spread news that is just meant to rile people up. There's a difference between sharing something that's a thoughtful piece done by a legitimate reporter or legitimate source, and to spread little bits and pieces, to create fabrications about things, whether it's some sort of conspiracy about how we all have to wear masks now, or whether it's some anti-Trump conspiracy, left or right. I don't care about your conspiracies. I care about truth. Truth doesn't care about political opinions. It just is what it is. Is it easy to understand? No. Do I see it all? No. Do you see it all? No. You should have some honesty and admit that. And all I know is we are living in very, very confusing times. I look at everything from a historical perspective, and I see that we are very much in a period where not having historical knowledge is detrimental to us. If anything, you should get some serious historical knowledge. Yeah, but I haven't got time. Everything is, well, the more you act like that, the more you're Chicken Little. You have to have a deeper layer of historical knowledge in order not to get swept away by whatever new trend happens. This week, maybe the crazies are on the left. Next week, maybe they're on the right. It's easy for it to happen. The issues today are very, very similar to what happened during the McCarthy era, because at that point, you were not allowed to speak if you had a left-wing opinion. It's a reversal of it. Now, I've heard people saying, we should have crushed them down then. Well, none of those people were alive then, so they don't understand what they're talking about. But the point is this. There are many, many historical relationships to this period. There's also a lot of connections with what we're seeing and the Chinese Cultural Revolution. You should look up the Chinese Cultural Revolution. A quick way to start is just type in Chinese Cultural Revolution into YouTube. You might get some images which will scare you. And in fact, there's so much that's so similar in the Chinese Revolution, Cultural Revolution of the 60s, to what's going on in the campuses and in the media and in certain aspect of our culture today that it's absolutely scary. Of course, everyone's saying, yeah, but we're all about love and empathy. And you know what? You can paint any word you wanted. I'm looking at the images. The images aren't saying that. The images are saying, be afraid of what you say. You don't want to get in trouble. By the way, the protesters are not the counterculture today. Not unless you consider Google, Facebook, Twitter, NBC, CNN, The Washington Post, The New York Times, Gillette, Starbucks, Disney, and a host of other companies all playing the woke game to be the counterculture. I consider that to be the mainstream culture. And what we're seeing is we're seeing the vanguards of some cultural revolution that wants to push things even further in that way. But they're not counter to the basic gist of everything. I mean, they talk against capitalism, but as long as everyone says the right things, everyone's fine. And I think it's time people stood up and said, at personal cost, you know, is your job on the line if you don't say the right thing? Maybe you better think about quitting. You know, are you going to get beat up if you say the wrong thing in the wrong place? You know, if I were the mayor of Minneapolis, when they all surrounded him and were all chanting, oh, shame, 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 prior to that moment, and they were asking him, are you going to defund the police? Well, this guy wouldn't have done it because he has no spine whatsoever, completely made of rubber. But I think a real person would have said, hey, everyone, get your cameras rolling. Make sure you watch what I'm about to do. Because then I would have turned around and gone after them. And here's the thing. He may have been severely beaten up for doing that at that moment. But you know what? It would have all been on camera. There's an interesting remark. Danton was one of the revolutionaries of the French Revolution. And but he started getting sick of what he was doing, and he started raising questions about it. And so they eventually arrested him, and then they took him to the guillotine to chop his head off. And before he left, he said, as they were putting him down, his last words were, hold my head up, it'll be worth it. And what he was saying is, this is essentially what the revolution is doing to us. And eventually Robespierre, the leader of the revolution, was also decapitated. So revolutions like this one have a way of eating their own. And we haven't got quite to that point yet. But before we do, and I think America's in a very different situation. I think the real problem is in America is that these people who are doing all this kind of crazy LARPing at revolution may eventually wake up those people who have formed militias a long time ago and are just been waiting for something. They have been very quiet, and I am grateful to anyone on the right who's in any sort of militia who's been standing back and just been kind of like, yeah, well, these guys, yeah, nah. Because I can see it's going to get very weird. What's going to happen the day after the next president is elected, after the election? I don't know, but it's not going to be pretty. And all I can say is you have to have courage to stand up. If more people have courage to stand up. Solzhenitsyn said when people were first brought into the Gulag, they were so terrified by the inquisitors. Eventually, they just learned that, like after World War II, some of the new prisoners, like the Latvians and stuff, were just like, yeah, of course I'm against you. You know, they just turned it around on them instantly and just said, yeah, no, I'm sorry, you can't really intimidate me. And that's what we need, is we need people who will say, please do not intimidate me. But like I say, I'm not really worried about a political side. I'm worried about both sides eventually. And I don't want to see us enter what might be coming. So the question is, are you willing to do something to help calm things down? We need a radical center is what we need, because I'm really tired of the radical fringes. We need the people in the middle to say, no, we're together, we're different. Yeah, there are people who are Christians who are a little suspicious of the gays, who are suspicious of, they're atheists, who are suspicious of the Muslims and whatnot. I'd rather us all be together, arguing openly, than I would see this kind of purity testing, or, like I say, what I'm afraid of on the right come. So, that's it. just a little something for you to think about. And hey, you could subscribe to this channel. Think about it. If you've made it this far, maybe I should do these in front because these things take forever. I'm sure most of the people have turned this off by now. But yeah, you could subscribe. If you feel like donating and getting some extra content, please do. I could use any financial help you have, but whatever. If you think this is something worth sharing, please do. As you will see, my numbers are not very high on this channel, and maybe a few more people need to listen. I don't want to become a huge mega channel, but I would probably like to get over 1,000. That would be a nice number to shoot for. Anyway, the truth is, I'm not really worried about all this stuff, because I think worry is never helpful. I am instead thoughtful, wondering, trying to hold the different ends of my friendships together with people who believe all sorts of different things. I do not post political stuff on my Facebook page or anything. I try to stay out of it, although I'll put my own stuff. But, if you can call this political in any manner you wish, but it's basically politics in the old sense of the word, which was about learning to get along and make decisions, and not about the new sense of the word, whereas if you don't believe the thing I believe in, I'm going to unfriend you. Well, I'm not going to unfriend you. You are my friends if you're listening to this, so thank you for listening. This is the Anadromist coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia, saying, just swim against the stream. Don't do what's expected of you, and learn to see through propaganda, and don't make it. Pretty please.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.